Thank you everybody for joining us today for our first industry update for 2022. Welcome to 2022. We're excited to be back. As always, please keep yourself muted during the presentation and use the chat feature for asking questions. We do have a guest joining us prior to Zach speaking. So if you have questions for Rich, he will be answering them as they go along in the chat. So feel free to go along with asking him questions during his presentation. And with that, this is being recorded and we will send this recording afterwards, and make sure to post this out on our website. And with that, I'm going to pass this over to John to welcome our guests.
Thank you, Hope. Welcome all and Happy New Year. We're really glad that you've tuned in again today. I would remind you that the information that we provide today is for the use and benefit of our restaurant, hotel, travel and tourism members and friends of PRLA and anyone in the industry. It is not designed as a press event and it is off the record. So if you're with the press, please disconnect and check in with us later. It's been a long 2 years, and who would guess that almost 2 years later, we're still talking about the pandemic, but unfortunately we are. One of the goals of PRLA that began on March 20th of 2020 was to find ways to help restaurants and hotels and travel and tourism partners get to the other side of this, both from federal, at a federal level and state level, and in many cases, local level. One of the great tools that helped a lot of businesses get to the other side of this was the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which PRLA advocated for, along with our national partners. PRLA actually benefited from it as well, and many of you did. We have with us today Rich Adams from Heartland Payroll Systems. Heartland Payment Systems and Payroll Systems is a huge supporter of PRLA and has been our preferred partner for as long as I can remember. We're very pleased to have them with us this year. By the way, PRLA uses Heartland Payroll. And as I said, we benefited from the Employee Retention Tax Credit like many of you did. Rich is here specifically to talk about ERTC and what's happening with it, how that may be able to help you. And again, it's brought many businesses to the other side of this, and I would encourage you to take special note of Rich's comments today as he walks through how this works. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Rich Adams from Heartland Payroll and HR Solutions. And following that, Zak Pyzik will take it away with the legislative update. So Rich, it's all yours.
John, thank you very much. And good morning, fellow members of the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association. It's my pleasure to join you this morning. And as John said, we've been a very big supporter of the PRLA, and I'm happy to be here this morning to share some of my knowledge on a subject, as John mentioned, that has benefited many members of the association, not only in the state of Pennsylvania, but across the country. We were talking before the call started, and just to share a quick statistic, just the impact that Heartland has brought to the American business public, and specifically in the hospitality space. Heartland has generated in excess of $300 million in employee retention tax credits that have directly benefited clients of Heartland. So as we walk through today's slides and information, I will be managing the chat along with Hope Sterner to answer your questions. So please don't hesitate to drop questions. On your screen here this morning, you see what I will be covering. A lot of this information, many of you have been thinking, I've heard the ERC or ERTC has expired due to the infrastructure bill passed by the recent administration. I will walk through how you can still take advantage of these credits, but I'll talk about the origin, how do you qualify, how do you claim the credits, other considerations, and as well, I will talk specifically about the recovery startup business. If you are a new business that was started during the throes of the pandemic, you want to pay special close attention to that. So with that, let's get into it. So our first slide here is what is the Employee Retention Tax Credit? Many of you already know this. This is a refundable tax credit that is used against employment taxes on a federal basis, equal to 50% of qualified wages and employer health care expenses paid from March 12th of 2020, the beginning of the pandemic, through December 30th of 2020. It was then extended by the Consolidated Appropriations Act, or the CARES Act, that was extended through originally June 30th of last year, and then it increased the amount of this refund or tax credit to 70%. The American Rescue Plan, which was passed at the end of 2020, updated those provisions. Among other relief provided, the utilization of the employee retention tax credit first outlined in the CARES Act was extended and modified for a second time with the passage of the ARP, or the American Rescue Plan, signed on March 11th of 2021. Eligible employers are able to take advantage of this program, what was originally thought to be through the end of 2021. As I mentioned at the start of this call, recent legislation suspended ERC as of September 30th of 2021. All is not lost, and I will get into that here in a second. Okay, so you own a restaurant, you own several restaurants, you own hotels, et cetera. How do you qualify? What's available? So a couple definitions for you. Qualified wages are equal to gross wages and employer health plan expenses. This is an important distinction. It's not employee contributions if you offer healthcare. It is the employer share of health plan expenses. It is applicable to the first $10,000 of qualified wages per quarter for each employee, with a maximum tax credit of $7,000 per employee per quarter. Now, those figures, please understand, are for 2021. We can talk specifically about 2020 as the call goes on. The employee retention tax credit originally was not allowed to be taken in conjunction with PPP, or the Paycheck Protection Program loan. However, any wages that were utilized or payroll expenses that were utilized using PPP funds are not eligible for this tax credit. So originally it was done away with and said, if you got PPP, you couldn't get ERC. They then changed the legislation to say that if you did receive a PPP loan, you could take the credit in the time that you didn't use those funds. So a little bit of confusion there. We've got a lot of questions regarding PPP, but know that if you did receive PPP funds, you still qualify. Okay, so I own a restaurant, I own a hotel. How do I qualify? There are two distinct ways that are mutually exclusive. First, business operations that were partially shut down or totally shut down due to a government order. This is federal, state, or local. If you are working or own a business in the city of Philadelphia, obviously local government agencies can control this. This includes restrictions on capacity and/or social distancing requirements. Okay, as we all know, when the shutdown came and non-essential businesses were not allowed to operate, if you still conducted payroll, those payroll wages potentially qualify. Then, as government began easing the restrictions and allowed us to open, some confined to only outdoor dining, some confined to 50% of indoor capacity, then it was extended to 75% of capacity, and then ultimately, as of June 1st in the state, we were open up to full capacity. Any of the payroll wages that you were paying during those times of government ordered restrictions would be eligible to qualify for this credit. Okay. In 2021, gross receipts, the other way you can qualify is what's called the gross receipts test. If in 2021, your gross receipts are less than 80% than compared to the same quarter in 2019, you'd qualify. So if you experienced a greater than 20% reduction in your gross receipts compared to the same quarter in 2019, you will qualify. A common misconception is the third bullet point. A lot of questions that we receive is, do I need to check both boxes in order to qualify? The answer is no. You only need to meet one of the above criteria, either the government ordered restriction or the gross receipts test. Now, in 2020, before we fast forward, the gross receipts test was a greater or 50% or greater reduction in gross receipts. That was obviously increased to the 80% test or 20% loss. And likewise for 2020, the percentage for qualified wages was 50%, and then obviously increased in 2021 to 70%. So I know I'm moving kind of quick and throwing a lot of numbers. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat. All right. So how do we claim the credits? How does a business owner claim their credits? Obviously now calendar years 2020 and 2021 are closed. In order to claim these credits, you will need to file an amended return. In the payroll world, that's called a 941X. And you file that in order to claim the credits. 941s, and this is an important point, 941Xs can be filed up to 3 years from the date of the original 941 being filed. Now, I want to pause here. This is extremely important for everybody on this call who may not have taken advantage of the employee retention tax credit and might be thinking, wow, the infrastructure bill that was passed did away with ERC. You can still go back and claim eligible credits up to 3 years from the date of the original filing of the quarterly 941. This is a huge benefit. And there are many companies, many businesses, many accounting agencies and firms like us that are offering these services to help business owners go back and claim those credits. Heartland, as I mentioned at the front of this call, has gathered over 300 million in employee retention tax credit for our clients. So if you haven't claimed these credits, all is not lost. You can go back and get them for up to 3 years. All right, some important considerations. Many owner operators might be thinking, well, geez, I have the owner, my husband, my wife, my spouse is on the payroll. Owners, shareholders, partners, family members' wages are not eligible to be considered for the employee retention tax credit. All of the acronyms that you see in the second bullet point, PPP, EIDL, FFCRA, sick pay, work opportunity tax credit, and other government-sponsored tax credit programs that were used for payroll are not eligible for the employee retention tax credit. We call that the double dip rule. You're not allowed to double dip if you're getting federally funded programs. Employers in 2020 that had more than 100 full-time equivalent employees are not eligible. They increased that for 2021 to 500 full-time equivalent employees are not eligible. An important consideration for our owners and operators on this call today, if you own multiple establishments that have 50% ownership that's consistent across all entities, that's what's called the aggregate rule, and you must roll all of the entities together to determine your full-time equivalent employee count. Okay, so if you own multiple establishments that you are a more than 50% owner across all, we combine the employee count in each to get to the 100 full-time equivalent or the 500 full-time equivalent. Okay, moving on. So part of the provision of the American Rescue Plan was there were businesses that were fortunate enough to begin during the pandemic, opened their doors. So they created a provision of what was called the recovery startup business. This is any business that began operations after February 15th of 2020, basically right before shutdown during the pandemic. If that business was started after February 15th of 2020 and does not have gross receipts that exceed $1 million, they qualify for what's called the recovery startup provision. It is not a requirement to meet the gross receipts test as we talked about earlier. And you would not otherwise be eligible under general eligibility considerations involving suspended business operations or decline in gross receipts. Essentially, if you were fortunate enough to start a business during the pandemic, you qualify if you fall under the $1 million gross receipts test. So how does the RSB work? It's eligible. It's the same calculation, 70% of the first $10,000 in wages per employee per quarter, maximum of $7,000 per employee. However, there's one limiting factor that the RSB has placed in the legislation that our ERC does not have. It limits the total credit to $50,000 per quarter. RSB, Recovery Startup Business, is only available for the third and fourth quarters of 2021. And because both of those quarters are now closed, the 941X is used to claim the credit for those closed quarters. So let's monetize that for a second. If you did start a business after February 15th of 2020, you are eligible and you fall into that $1 million threshold, you would be eligible to potentially receive a $100,000 tax credit, $50,000 in each of quarters 3 and 4 of 2021. Pretty substantial. So I think the next slide. Nope, that's not me. I think actually, if you go back, brings me to the end of all of the slides. I think hope we cut our time in half, but I went through things pretty quickly. I don't see much in the chat, but if I can go back and answer any questions, by all means, please drop a question in the chat or chime up, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Rich, for that very thorough update, and I hope I could let you chime in if you had.
Nope, you're fine. No, that's fine. I mean, the only thing I was going to say is, Rich, if you wanted to put your email into the chat, we could, if anybody had any questions. Oh, and then Jack Cohen.
Yep, Jack, go ahead.
I just want you to know that I got a letter from the feds that said they thought that we were a government agency, so that we were not eligible, and I owe all that money back. Obviously, our accountants are telling us that's not factual. We had to resubmit to let them know that we're not, and that's now going on 7 months, and they haven't responded yet.
Yeah, that's not surprising, Jack. The lack of response from the government, like most entities, both federal and not otherwise, they're understaffed and overworked. But you know, this employee retention tax credit is eligible to both profit and nonprofit businesses that are not government entities. So, like you said, if you demonstrated that you're not a government entity, everything I've read and all the studying I've done, you qualify.
Thanks.
Rich, if I may comment on your comment about the lack of response, we have had a few comments from members and complaints from members about they had submitted all the proper paperwork and not received payment, and it was very delayed. And we've had other members who got it right away, frankly, including us. So it seems to be all over the place. And this is also a nationwide problem, because I hear it from my counterparts at other restaurant and lodging associations around the country. We've worked with both the National Restaurant Association and the AHLA, and the NRA in particular is working diligently with the proper departments there, the IRS and others, to try to get these payments out. We've issued letters and a few other things, and doing everything we can to try to speed them up. So if you're one of those that are still awaiting payments, just know that there's a lot of efforts underway to get that resolved.
Yeah, John, those are critical points, and thank you for your efforts, and as well on behalf of the NRA is to get those payments expedited. Just as a quick fact here on the process for the amended tax returns of the 941X, it is a paper process. And John, you mentioned you might have received, or the association received their credits quickly. It's probably because they were being filed timely within each payroll. All 941Xs are paper copies that are mailed to the IRS, and then the IRS processes the paper and then prints checks and mails checks back out to the client. We're currently seeing delays of 15 to 24 weeks for payment upon receipt of the completed 941X. So you're 100% correct, John. The length of time is extraordinary, and I'm not a CPA, nor am I an accountant. I only have 30 years of experience in the industry. If you've realized the credit and haven't received it from the government, it is still a taxable event, and there may be tax implications to your business. So some things to consider when you speak with your tax professional.
That's a good point too, Rich. There is a question that just came in from Becky Harrison, who said, what is the loss percent for 2020 and 2021? And did you say the restrictions outweigh the loss?
Okay, yeah. So the first question is, in 2020, it's the gross receipts test is a greater than 50% loss in compared to the same quarter in 2019. And in 2021, it increased or dropped, I should say, to a greater than 20% loss compared to the same quarter in 2019. So 2020 is 50%, 2021 is 20%. Did I say the restrictions outweigh the loss? No, they're mutually exclusive, meaning you only have to qualify by one. You don't need both, and neither one of them disqualifies the other. So if you qualify via the gross receipts test, you don't need to worry about the capacity limitations. Or if you qualify by the capacity limitations, you don't need to be worried about the gross receipts test. Good question.
Also, Rich, Tim O'Leary asks, I believe Heartland charges $250 for each quarter to go back and file. Is this credit guaranteed if you meet one of the requirements?
So yes, Tim, thanks for the question. You are correct. When Heartland amends a prior quarter return, we do charge a nominal $250 fee. I say it's nominal. I'll explain that in a second, to go back and file. I cannot speak on behalf of the government, and I will say that no credit is guaranteed. It's still subject to review. But what we're seeing is upon filing of the 941Xs, we're seeing a 95 to 99% realization rate upon filing 941Xs. So no, it's not 100% guaranteed, but we're not seeing much in the way of pushback.
Thanks, Rich. It appears that's the end of the questions.
Okay. Are we able to file, Tim asked, are we able to file for Q2 and Q3 of 2020? The answer is yes. If you were operating under a restriction or experienced a loss and you qualify, you are able to go back and amend those quarters, 941s, using the 941X procedure, as I mentioned earlier, and earn those credits for up to 3 years from the original date of filing.
Thank you very much, Rich. We appreciate that and appreciate you being here, and thank you for that review. If anybody does have any additional questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We can address them towards the end of the webinar, and thanks, Rich, for providing your contact information there in the chat as well. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year and happy Webinar Wednesday. I'm Zak Pyzik, the Director of Government Affairs at the Pennsylvania Restaurant and Lodging Association. I really hope all of you enjoyed the holiday season. I can't believe it's been a whole year technically since our last update. So much has happened since we've been away. 2021 left, and then all of a sudden we come back and we've got some updates on leadership, new electeds, unfortunately some new mandates, and out of nowhere the Eagles are going to the playoffs. We're covering a lot on today's webinar, but don't worry, it is recorded. So you could always rewatch, and we will send this out in today's daily update. Let's kick it off with everyone's favorite topic, federal updates. Unfortunately, recent data on COVID cases here in the United States does not paint a pretty picture. We know the restaurant industry, for instance, is still 750,000 jobs fewer than we were before the pandemic nationally. Restaurants have already been using best practices and doing all that they can to make sure our guests and staff are safe from the virus. But we were the first industry to be shut down. And unfortunately, we will likely be the last ones to come back online. We also know that people have been canceling trips, planning less travel. And unfortunately, the recent spike in cases has led to consumer behavior changing in the industries that impact us the most, and also some additional mitigation. And all kidding aside, I don't just mean this as a Game of Thrones reference, but winter is coming, winter is here, and we all know that certain sections of the industry really do take a big hit during this time of the year. We all know and have been saying from the top of our lungs for months now that COVID-19 is not a short-term problem. We are at month 20 right now, and we're hoping to see some more permanent solutions coming out of DC and out of Harrisburg, like replenishing the RRF fund. And we're also going to ramp up advocacy for the CHIRP program here in Pennsylvania. So kicking things off substantively here, the Build Back Better plan. Through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, we know that there is about $18 billion coming to Pennsylvania. Lots of money in rail projects and extensions. Pennsylvania Airport received some pretty big news recently. The Philadelphia International Airport is receiving $32 million in funding. The Pittsburgh International Airport is receiving a little over $11 million. Biden and his team have spent most of the holidays working the phones and trying to drum up support regarding his Build Back Better Act. It may be a new year, but we're seeing some of the same old problems. Passing the bill through both chambers seems just as tough now for Biden as it did in 2021. Senator Schumer recently said that he wants to push for a vote on the Build Back Better Act in the Senate by the end of January. I'm told that they are going to have a debate on Senate rules on January 17th, and so it's likely nothing would happen before then. Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin continue to both be problematic for the Biden administration. And so I guess the question for many of you is, what does all of this mean for RRF? So while he still opposes the legislation, last time I looked, Senator Manchin opened the door over the weekend to what supporting the Build Back Better Act might look like. Depending on the position Manchin takes, that could potentially slow down efforts for some of the relief legislation ideas that have been floated out there, like the bill we'd hope would include RRF. Unfortunately, no clear path forward right now. We have to play the waiting game. With the rise in variants and COVID cases, now is definitely the time to remind legislators that this sort of relief is what the industry needs. Congress is also going to take on some voting rights legislation this week and next week. We don't expect much action on legislation that would contain relief elements like RRF in the first half of January. But there is still talk about a relief package being introduced. It's being crafted. This would contain a number of relief elements, including for gyms, possibly salons, and it would certainly include RRF. Our national partners, the NRA, is driving that conversation. On the ERTC, thanks again, Rich, for your update. There is a lot moving on this issue. The Infrastructure and Jobs Act, as many of you know, eliminated Q4 of the ERTC, but we've heard from many operators asking where that check is for last year. Again, we've been pushing for operators to receive payments by the end of 2021. We know, obviously, that's not been the case, but it is still a top priority for us and our national partners. Operators who are filing taxes for 2021 still have to count ERTC checks as income in 2021, and we are advocating that the IRS distribute these payments. There's also a grassroots petition that has more than 5,000 signatures on it right now. I can throw that petition in the chat after my update. And lastly, we also have a bipartisan bill that's been introduced in the House from Representative Carol Miller and Representative Stephanie Murphy to restore ERTC for Q4. We're working on getting that bill introduced in the Senate as well. I know this is very creative here. The name of the bill is the Employee Retention Tax Credit Reinstatement Act. And so we will keep you posted on the progress that makes. The 80-20 rule, earlier this year, the Department of Labor released new tip credit regulations that govern pay for tipped employees, AKA the 80-20 rule. This new reg went into effect on December 28th, 2021, basically reinstating the Obama era 80-20 rule with a few twists. In November, our national partners, the NRA and the Texas Restaurant Association, filed an emergency lawsuit in Texas federal court challenging the rules and asking for an immediate injunction. Unfortunately, we don't expect the court that it will allow the new regs to remain in effect, and that argument will likely not take place until January. And so, the advice now is to obviously fall into compliance because we don't know what's going to happen with that lawsuit. The new regs kind of divides three different categories of work. There is tip producing work, there is directly supporting work, and then there's a category of not part of the tipped occupation. Restaurants cannot take a tip credit for the time spent on tasks considered directly supporting work. That exceeds 20% of the work week or 30 continuous minutes in time. So examples of tip producing work: serving food and drink, filling water glasses at a table, verifying the allergies for a customer, or cleaning a spill, walking to the kitchen to retrieve food, or processing credit card and cash payments, removing plates. Some examples of duties that are not part of the tipped occupation: general food prep, for instance, including salad assembly. You definitely want to take steps to comply with the new tip credit regulations. It's highly likely the new regs will remain in effect. The NRA will have webinars available to go through this new policy. And from what I understand, this is going to be offered to non-members of the NRA as well. And so we'll let you know when that is scheduled. Stay tuned to the daily update. What's the risk right now for employers? Will employees be turning in employers? I've had that question asked of me a few times. It's unlikely that there would be much enforcement right now, but given that there is not a high likelihood of a stay being imposed, it is pertinent, again, that you act in good faith to be compliant. We do understand that this rule creates some confusion and some compliance challenges. And so we will throw a link in the chat that does provide some additional guidance and additional information on the subject. Want to touch on the visa subject quickly. Thanks to our lobbying efforts, the lobbying efforts of our national partners, specifically from the AHLA, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of Labor announced that they will make available an additional 20,000 H-2B temporary non-agricultural worker visas for the fiscal year of 2022. These visas, from what I understand, will be set aside for U.S. employers seeking to employ additional workers on or before March 31st of 2022. This marks the first time these additional visas have been made available for the first half of the fiscal year. There will be 13,500 visas available to returning workers who received an H-2B visa during one of the last 3 fiscal years. And then the remaining 6,500 visas are reserved for individuals from certain countries, and this will create opportunities for employers struggling to find workers right now. This proposed rule is technically still making its way through the process. From what I understand, any new information we get, we will provide on the next webinar as well as in the daily update. Biden's emergency temporary standard. We have not talked since then, but many of you likely know that the Sixth Circuit Court did rule 2-1 that the vaccine or testing mandate for workers at larger companies could take effect. We know that the plan requires workers at larger companies to be vaccinated or wear face masks and get tested weekly. There's a lot of speculation on all sides regarding the ETS right now, since the case will be brought in front of the Supreme Court. Oral arguments are being heard by SCOTUS on January 7th, that's this Friday, and they will determine whether OSHA has the authority to impose such a requirement. My guess is that if, the easy way out here is to not rule on the constitutionality of the standard. And so if they wanted to do something quickly, they could just issue a stay. If I were a justice, which I am not, unfortunately, I would just issue a stay because of the confusion that there is amongst different states, the various lawsuits. And you've probably seen some states, their leadership has come up and adamantly has opposed the ETS, and that's created a lot of confusion. If they were to punt on the larger constitutional question here, there is a chance that there could be a ruling as soon as next week. And again, that could happen, especially if they were to go the stay route. Here's the brief rundown that I can provide you with. The emergency temporary standard covers any employer with 100 or more employees. It's firm or company-wide. The ETS requires employers to provide paid time to workers to get vaccinated and to allow for paid leave to recover from any side effects. Employers have to determine the vaccination status of each employee. They have to obtain acceptable proof of vaccination status from vaccinated employees, and you have to maintain records and a roster of each employee's vaccine status. This has to be a written policy, and that policy has to require employees provide prompt notice when they test positive of coronavirus or if they receive a diagnosis. It has to ensure that each employee who has not been fully vaccinated wears a face covering when they are indoors. And it does not require the employer to pay for that testing, but it does, again, require a written policy, though. OSHA has said that they will not enforce penalties prior to January 10th, 2022. By January 10th, though, employers as of now have to work on determining the vaccination status of each employee. And you have to obtain proof of the vaccine where necessary, maintain the records of the vaccine status, and also by January 10th, the employees, you must require that employees promptly provide notice of having COVID-19 and ensure that each employee that is not fully vaccinated wear a face mask. And again, your written policy has to be established and has to convey how you're going to approach all of this. There are a lot of nuances to the ETS, and I imagine there might be a lot of questions on the subject. It'd obviously be impossible to answer all of the questions out there. And so please consider, if this does impact you watching one of the webinars, we've been providing links to those webinars in our daily update. We'll continue to provide those in the daily update email. And I could also throw some in the chat. I believe there's actually a webinar. I want to say it's an AHLA webinar happening this afternoon at 3 p.m. That was in the daily update. We also have a fact sheet and a link to some FAQs that might answer some of your questions. State issues. So the state of the legislature, the House and the Senate both convened briefly yesterday for the reorg process. The House comes back to session next week, January 10th, and the Senate will return the following week, Tuesday, January 18th. Monday, both chambers are closed and off of work due to MLK Jr. Day. If you look at the legislative calendar, it's filled with hearings and discussion about the new House and Senate district maps. There'll be tons of news and hearings on that subject this week and next. You've probably already seen much of it. You might have also seen that the new minimum wage, tipped wage regulations have circulated and are going through the IRC process. PRLA did submit public comment on those regulations, along with some of our members who submitted public comment on their own as well. I really want to thank the PRLA Government Affairs Committee, some of whom are on this call today, for their diligent review and feedback of those regulations. The parts of the regs that impact our industries are mostly being changed to come more in line with the federal regs. Things like tip pooling are addressed. Our opposition conveyed in the public comment mostly came from a procedural point of view. Many of you probably haven't had time to read dozens of pages worth of regulations. And so something like this, from our perspective, arguably ought to be handled and addressed by the legislature, not the executive branch. And so that's the position that our committee and our members landed on. Senator Jake Corman was unanimously reelected yesterday as President Pro Temp of the Senate of Pennsylvania. You might have also seen that Representative Daryl Metcalf announced that he will finish his current term, which concludes at the end of November, but that he will not seek re-election. And then Lancaster County Representative David Hickernell also made a similar announcement. He too will not seek re-election in 2022. A big tourism announcement just before the holidays. Pennsylvania is set to receive $17 million in the form of a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration to boost travel and tourism here in Pennsylvania. PRLA wrote a letter in support of these funds going directly to the tourism office, as did Chair Daly and Chairman Millard. I can add those letters to the chat if you are interested in those. And PRLA recently discussed this and discussed this at our tourism partnership meeting, which we hosted back in December. We had a great meeting with many of our tourism partners, and I just want to thank those who were able to join that conversation. We're going to work on establishing a leadership structure for that partnership and also expanding that group. And so if travel and tourism priorities are important to any of you or to your business, and you'd like to be a part of that tourism partnership, please email me. I know some of you have already mentioned in prior conversations that you'd like to be a part of that. And as we continue to have those conversations, a big priority of ours is to expand that group. Some new legislation in the state and some legislation on the move. House Bill 2049, moving its way through the legislative process. PRLA has helped shape and write that legislation. It would amend the definition of public venue by adding an amusement park defined in the Amusement Ride Inspection Act to the list of areas. I want to thank Representative McKenzie for his hard work on this bill. If passed, it would allow amusement parks that hold a restaurant liquor license prior to January of 2021 to exchange that for a public venue license at no cost. Typically, the cost would be $5,000. I've talked with a few parks about this already. It's something that many are interested in taking advantage of right away, and others just like having the option. But we're really thankful to Representative McKenzie for his office's work on that. Senator Ryan Aument recently introduced Senate Bill 986, which, if passed, would waive the 2021 license fee, for liquor license fee for hotel and restaurant licensees that were closed as a result of the proclamation of disaster emergency. We are in the very early stages of that, but we will keep a close eye on it as it works its way through the process. House Bill 2059. This is legislation that was just recently reported out of the House Liquor Control Committee in December on a party line vote, if I'm remembering correctly, and the bill eliminates the square footage requirements for off-premise consumptions. It also provides for sales clerks under 18 years old to perform a sale if assisted by an employee that is 18 years or older. So a wine expanded permit holder would be able to use a register that is not located on the licensed portion of the premises, but is located within the same building as the licensed premise. The PA Senate in December also passed Senate Bill 566 with amendment by a vote of 26 to 24. This bill would establish a statewide auction that would occur once a year for the purpose of auctioning liquor licenses that did not receive bids during the regular auction process. It would also restructure payment for a winning bid to align with the current process of a license transfer. The amended version of the bill includes language that would permit certain licensees to sell ready-to-drink cocktails for off-premise consumption when sold in a certain amount of quantity. PRLA did sign a coalition letter in support of that amendment. Not sure the fate of this bill, given some of the controversy around the issue, but nonetheless, it is something that the House is going to begin tackling and having a conversation about in January and February. Some local issues that I want to cover here: Allegheny County updating Article 3. Do you live in Allegheny County, or do you have a food service establishment in the county? If so, we want to hear from you. The Allegheny County Health Department is updating Article 3, the food safety regulations. These are the regs that allow ACHD to permit and inspect food facilities in the county. Article 3 sets the standard for local food operators, and the proposed changes could impact your business if you operate in Allegheny County. And so thank you, Steph and Kendra and Hope, for your hard work on the PRLA team in creating a brief survey that we've recently distributed to operators. We're asking that you complete that survey so that we can, if you operate or live in Allegheny County, so that we can collect opinions and concerns about the proposed regs. We plan on using those responses to craft public comment that we plan on submitting later this month. If you are interested, you obviously could submit individual comments to ACHD on the issue on or before January 24th of 2022, either via email or by mail. And there is a public hearing scheduled on the subject for 5 p.m. on Thursday, January 20th. We'll throw those links in the chat. We've also been including those in the daily update as well. On the other side of the state, Philadelphia, first, I want to get into this vaccine mandate. The Philadelphia Indoor Food Establishment Vaccine Mandate is what they're calling it. As of January 3rd, 2022, any place that sells food or drink to be consumed on site in Philadelphia will have to require that everyone who enters be fully vaccinated against COVID-19. January 3rd to January 17th, establishments can accept a negative COVID-19 test in lieu of the vaccination. That test would have to have been taken within the last 24 hours. After January 17th, negative tests will no longer be accepted, and the full vaccine mandate will take effect. This is for indoor restaurants, halls that serve food, caterers, movie theaters, cafes, even larger establishments. Cafes within larger spaces are also included. Bowling alleys are as well. Conventions, if food is being served, casinos, and even food courts and seating areas would need to be portioned off if it's in a place like a mall or something like that. Who will this not apply to? Schools, grocery stores, hospitals, and other places serving vulnerable populations. Children under 3 years old and those with valid medical or religious exemptions will not be required to comply. They will still have to produce a negative COVID-19 test result, though. Enforcement will be based on complaints. And in larger establishments like hotels, this only applies to the area of the building where food and beverage is being served. So operators will be expected to keep records of vaccines and exemptions, but only for staff. From what I understand, you do not have to keep those records for customers. We can throw the formal regulations in the chat. Ben Fletcher from the PRLA team has been working nonstop on answering questions from operators and helping us sort through various concerns. Thank you, Ben, for your help on that. We submitted questions per some of these conversations that we've received from members with the Department of Health in Philadelphia, and Commissioner Bedigal recently responded to those questions. And we've created a document that highlights the Department of Health's answers to those questions. And we could throw that document in the chat as well. Sticking in Philadelphia, outdoor dining. As many of you know, Councilmember Alan Dom's bill allowing for streeteries permanently in the city passed out of council at the end of last year. The mayor signed it, and the new program will likely take effect in March. Problem is, what does that mean for operators in the meantime? Streeteries can continue to operate in University City, Old City, West Philly, East Passyunk, Center City as well. But you may have received an email saying that you have to reapply or get a new permit. Streeteries outside of those areas would now have to go through the council ordinance process, unfortunately. We're trying to get more clarity at PRLA on what that process would look like, but the regs are still up in the air. They're still being drafted. Please stay tuned again to our daily update email. As soon as we have more guidance, we'll send that directly to you. I should note here that sidewalk cafes, if you operate a sidewalk cafe as opposed to a streetery, those are still allowed to operate as is until the end of 2022, due to an extension that we lobbied for that council passed at the end of last year. Mayor Kenny has also signed that bill. This was a big win for us in Philadelphia in the sense that we were able to keep the program permanent, but it's obviously disappointing for the many streeteries that have been left out of the equation. And so my promise to you is that PRLA will continue to work with those operators and with City Council on amendments in 2022 to address those issues that we're facing. Next up, I kind of want to just talk about some FYIs. New year, we've got some new electeds. Congratulations to former State Representative Ed Gainey. He was officially sworn in as Pittsburgh's 61st mayor on Monday. Mayor Gainey is the first Black mayor in the city's history. PRLA is really looking forward to working with Mayor Gainey and his administration. Wanda Williams was sworn in as Harrisburg's new mayor on Monday. Congratulations, Mayor Williams. The city of Allentown also has a new mayor. Mayor Matt Tierk was sworn in earlier this week. I believe he already hit the ground running, meeting with employees on Monday and Tuesday. Lastly, Gettysburg has a new mayor as well. Gettysburg newest mayor, Rita Freeling, was sworn in on Monday. She is the first African-American and the first woman to have that job. And so congratulations there as well. Counties all over the state, Montgomery County, Delaware County, have been having their swearing in ceremonies, mostly swearing in new judges. What's next for the political landscape here in Pennsylvania? Well, politically, PA is wide open in 2022. We've got Democrat Governor Tom Wolf and Republican U.S. Senator Pat Toomey both leaving office this year. There are already very contentious primaries for both of those seats. We've got Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, U.S. Representative Connor Lamb, Montgomery County Commissioner Val Arkush, and State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta all running on the Democratic side of things to be Senator Toomey's replacement. On the R side, I believe you've got three candidates running. David McCormick, a former hedge fund manager and a veteran, is running for that seat. I'm told Carla Sands, who was named U.S. Ambassador to Denmark by President Trump, and Dr. Oz is running for that seat as well. Or I don't know if you've seen this recent news. If you strictly follow AP style formatting, I guess we should call him Mr. Oz, but nonetheless, he is also in that race. We all know on the governor side of things, AG Josh Shapiro remains the favorite. On the Democrat side of things, Republicans have about 10 to 12 candidates running, though the field has started narrowing down somewhat. The first GOP gubernatorial debate is scheduled for today, I believe, and it'll be a 90-minute debate and will be live on PCN. I believe that's this evening, and I'm told that there are 12 candidates who will be participating in that race. And so I know we covered a lot today. Always happy to answer any questions. I can start sorting through some of the questions that you might have put in the chat in the meantime. And I just want to thank you all for joining us on the first webinar of 2022. Really looking forward to all that we can accomplish this year. And lastly, want to wish everybody a happy new year. And so I'll kick it back over to Hope, and I'll start sorting through some questions we may have received in the meantime.
Great, thanks, Zach, and thanks, Rich. Thanks for monitoring the chat too and answering some of those questions that are coming up as we've gone on through our webinar. Some events are coming up, some webinars are coming up. So our chapter meetings are kicking off starting this week with some Zoom calls, and then next week with some Zoom meetings. So please join us. They'll be talking about what the chapters are looking to do for this year and how they want to formulate their plans for the 2022 calendar. We also have some chapter installations coming up. So we will be swearing in some new officers into our different chapters. So please keep an eye out for those invitations. It's a great way to start to get back in the swing of things and networking with your regional chapter boards. And for webinars, just really quick, because I didn't see that up there, or can you go back? Yeah, Coffee with the Chairman. Please join us on January 12th. We will be having a live webinar with John and Tom Neely, introducing you to our 2022 chairman of the board. Be talking a little bit about what he's about, how he got here, and what he's looking to do this year. So please join us to meet our new chairman. We also will be coming back on the 2nd of February with our next industry update. We will be coming back and then coming back for our webinar Wednesdays with a topic later in February on the 16th with BMI, talking with Dan Spears, talking about some music licensing and what you need to know. So please keep an eye out that for registrations in our daily update and join us on those webinars. ServSafe. We have a litany of classes going on across the state. So please be sure to make sure that you are up to date and your staff is up to date and you're following, and because they will be checking, they will be citing, and they will be looking for your certificates to be valid. Serve Success, ServSafe Workplace, there's some really great online training that you could be using with your staff to help with furthering their tracks at your organization. And January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. So we're going to be doing some various posts through social and through our daily update and talking at chapter meetings about the Best Alliance partnership we have, the free training we have available, and just some of the things that you could be doing with your staff to get them up to speed on prevention training for human trafficking. And next Tuesday is actually Human Trafficking Awareness Day. So if you and your staff want to participate, wear blue that day and take a picture and post it up on your Instagram with hashtag Wear Blue Day to raise some awareness about human trafficking and the issues that are around that. And then I guess, Zach, it's up to you. I mean, I think there's some questions, but I know people have been answering them too.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll just go through this real quick. Bob, I just want to thank you for that comment. I understand where you're coming from and appreciate that perspective. I don't know, John, if you might have a comment here, but in terms of mitigation, I don't think we could expect any statewide mitigation given the circumstances. John, do you want to chime in on that? Or
Sure, I'd be happy to. And Bob, I also appreciate the comment. It's well thought out and certainly accurate. I think the one thing we know for sure about COVID is that nobody really knows anything for sure. Because everything changes every day. And that's been the problem since for 2 years now that we've been dealing with. Governor Wolf, just prior to the holidays, I think it was on December 14th, in an interview on KDKA, and we featured it in the updates, you probably saw it, commented that in his mind, the solution to this situation, the COVID situation, is vaccinations, not mitigation. And I happened to have an opportunity to have a sit down with him on the next day and thanked him for that comment and that perspective. And he reiterated it during that meeting. He said, I firmly believe that. He said, we all tried to do what we thought was right over the last 18 months. Some of it was right, some of it wasn't right. And nobody knew what we should do, but we were all just trying to do the right thing. But he said, I don't see that coming again. We've got to focus on getting people vaccinated and not on statewide mitigation. So we'll see if that holds true. I believed him based on the conversation we have had, and also the facts from looking around the country where there was a lot of mitigation versus very little mitigation. There wasn't much difference in the total overall outcome of cases, hospitalizations, or deaths when you look at those. In fact, some cases with heavy mitigation fared the worst in those categories. So I'm not so sure we need to be concerned about that. But your other point, Bob, that if you read between the lines, is all of the press about this definitely impacts business too. We had a suggestion from one of our members in Philadelphia that the Philadelphia Health Department should really be recommending that people go to restaurants for gatherings because they're safer than any place else they can go. And there's a lot of truth to that to be said too. And every time there's mitigation that comes out anywhere, it definitely affects business. I have a friend who has a restaurant in New York State, and the Saturday night before Governor Hochul put in place her mask mandate, she just announced it on Friday. It wasn't even in place till Monday, but he lost half his reservations just based on that announcement, because people think that when things like that are announced, there's actually facts behind them, which often there is not. So hear your point, Bob. That's what I know about it at this point in time. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Zach.
Thank you, John. Appreciate that. And again, Bob, thank you for that comment. I appreciate that point. Rich, thank you for addressing some of the ERTC questions that came up in the chat. Going through here, Steph did provide that link to the Article 3 survey. Thanks for putting that in the chat, Steph. And thank you, Ben, as well for answering some of those questions. You're spot on in terms of the vaccine mandate having an end date. It does not, from what we understand. And then Bob, thanks for the additional information on the GOP debate this evening. I always have PCN running at my house, and my wife hates that, but nonetheless, I wouldn't miss this one, but I hope you all will tune in 7 p.m. According to Bob's comment here, and that sounds about right. It looks like it's at Dickinson College, so that'll be fun to watch. Like I said, I think there are 12 candidates involved. Very interested in seeing how that plays out. So thank you all again for joining us at the first webinar of the year, and looking forward to seeing many of you in February.
Thank you, Zach. Great job. Appreciate it. And thanks, Hope, for moderating, and for everyone else that participated. And thank you all for being with us again today.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.